Hello everybody and welcome to another Mr. Acid Gaming video. It's been a while since I've uploaded any. I've been busy with other stuff. But I decided I would do a video about the loot tables and how looting works in 7 Days to Die. I've been working on an overhaul mod of my own. And I was watching the Not a Gamer Gaming video, and Daphne on Not a Gamer Gaming NAG played 7 Days to Die with the compo, a mod where you've watched any of the other 7 Days to Die streamers. You've probably at least seen some of their POIs. It's what they got famous for initially. They're also a very fun channel. It's Not a Gamer and Genosis. They have two channels. I would definitely look into them. But she was saying something about not really understanding how loot stage worked. And I left a comment explaining it as best I could and decided I would do a video. And the basic idea behind it is fairly simple. What I've got here is loot.xml, which is the actual file that the game calls to when you loot something. So in Alpha 19, let's start with a little background here. Loot stage was the same as game stage, but they wanted to be able to reward players for doing harder POIs and playing in harder biomes. So in order to do that without increasing the difficulty, they had to separate them into game stage and loot stage. Game stage is what kind of dictates the level of difficulty that the game ramps up to, like the difficulty of the zombies you're fighting mostly, but also their hit points and other things. Or at least it should. Definitely the difficulty level of the zombies themselves are increased by game stage, and the quantity of how many will show up, especially on Horde nights. So if they hadn't separated them, basically what would have happened is, let's say that being in the wasteland increases your if they didn't separate it game stage by 20. It would mean you'd get better loot, but it would also make things harder. So that's really not rewarding you for being in the wasteland. It's more like it's punishing you on top of it already being punishing. So they had to separate why they did it. So now they can increase the loot stage without increasing difficulty beyond what's already beyond it already being more difficult, because it's a more difficult biome or a harder POI. So what happens is that as you play the game, kill more zombies, you get higher levels, day count goes up. If you don't die, it impacts your game state. Dying reduces your game state. And all of that also increases your loot stage. Other things also increase your loot stage. The POIs you're in, and the biome you're in. Lucky Looter, and Looting Can. All those things will boost your loot state. Okay? Fairly straightforward so far. So here's where we start getting into the XML part of it, how the looting actually works. So you have two different types of loot probability templates, is what they're called. And all that really means is that depending on the template, you have a different probability, a different percentage chance to get something when you loot. Again, it's fairly straightforward, the basic idea behind it. So these first ones here are very low to guaranteed. These are universal. So it doesn't matter, you see here loot level 1 to 999,999. What that means is that it doesn't matter what your loot stage is, you will always have a probability of 5% on very low probability, if that is what is put in for a particular loot table or item. All the way up to you will always get it with guaranteed, because it's a 1 means 100%. Then you start getting into the tier-based probability templates tables here. So you can see here, for example, at loot stage 6, you have a 20% chance to get tier 0 loot, which would be things like pipe weapons and armor. Things like cloth and resources are pretty much always affected by these universal tables or probability templates rather than tier-based templates. These mostly affect weapons, armor, and other things that are kind of, how would be the best way to phrase it? Placed behind level walls, leveling walls, I said, difficulty, I guess you could say. So how it works is that as you level up your loot stage and game stage, your level, everything impacts all of it. Up to level loot stage 30, right here, at which point you have a 100% chance to get tier 0 stuff. And then it starts dropping off because you'll start, you're getting closer to where you can get tier 1 stuff. And then by the time you're at loot stage 60, you're down to a 0% chance to get tier 0 stuff because you don't need it anymore. So that's how they kind of balance out what you're getting. And the only thing that's really important that I need to tell you about here is that for tier 1 loot, you have to be at level loot stage 42 or higher. See right here, it's loot level 0 to 41, probability 0. You will not find, without mods, tier 1 loot until you hit at least loot stage 42, loot level 42. In which case, it does the same exact thing as the tier 0 table. It gradually increases until it hits 100% and then drops off because you're going to start getting into 2 stuff. Tier 2 stuff kicks in at loot level 102. Same thing. Increases until it hits a point and then drops off. Or it's also a tier 2. Tier 3 kicks in at 192. And then by the time you hit 290, your loot stage of the 290 and up, you will always find only tier 3 stuff. Okay, and then there's quest tier probabilities. Very similar. This depends on the tier level of your quests, and you get better stuff. Higher level tier quests, better rewards. And then the quality of what you find works the exact same way, basically. That's what these are for. Quality templates. Basically, you start by finding tier 1 quality stuff. It gradually increases until you're finding only tier 6 quality stuff. And then, first with tier 0 loot, then tier 1, 2, until you're all the way up to only finding tier 6, tier 3 loot. Quality level 6, tier 3. And then because all the previous tiers of loot, you hit that point where you're only getting tier 6 or quality stuff, and then you stop finding that tier of loot altogether because you're past it. Another thing that loot stage affects is we can look here at ammo groups. So for example, this is group 9mm small. So for example, whenever you loot something that is supposed to have a small amount of ammo in it, or can have a small amount of ammo in it, say, it will make a call to this group. And you will get 6 to 8 9mm rounds, and where loot stage comes into play is that the higher your loot stage, the more you'll get, up to double. So you can get up to 16 instead of only 8. So that's basically loot stage right there in a nutshell. And it's as simple as that The higher your loot stage is, the better the quality of stuff you're going to find, the more of it you'll find, and the higher the tier of the loot. Now, how the loot tables actually work, again, the basic idea of it is simple. Actually modding this stuff is not, but I can find, say, top level and show you. Okay, let's look at the Crack-a-Book crate. A lot of people love their Crack-a-Book. So when you loot a Crack-a-Book crate, this is the table that gets called to. Then what it does is that the count function here can be numbers. For example, I'm seeing it be a single number, in which case it will always give you randomly that number of items from this, so like it can be 7 and you always get 7 things. All means it will give you one of each. It will try, not necessarily will give you one of each. You still have a probability of getting only one item, but you will guaranteed get one, but potentially up to 3. That's what the all means. It will run through all of these things. If there was a number there, say for example 7, it would randomly pick between these 3 7 times. It basically runs that many times through this table and then pops out that many things. If it was say between 1 and comma 7, it would randomly choose 1 to 7 times, and then it would spit out that number of things. So what we look at here is that the first one, again, is count 1. It will always give you one of those things. What we have here is those universal loot probability templates, medium and very low. So you have a medium chance to get a second book, and very low chance to get 3. Force probability true means that even though this says all, if this wasn't here, it wouldn't necessarily pay attention to these templates. It might give you 3 every time. By putting this function in here, it will always obey these templates, which means you will always have a medium and a very low chance for that second and third book. Then we can look right above here. This is what it's making calls to. Looks at crate 1, it's looking here. Crate 2 is here, and crate 3 is here. Why they felt a need to do it this way, I'm not sure. It's probably just an organizational thing, in case they want to add anything to these to make them different from each other. But as of now, they all call to the same group. Books all scale. So we can kind of go up here to the top, search it, and find that. Yes, it's actually low. Low. Here we go. This is the actual loot. So we look at here, and there is no count associated with it, so it will only give you one of these things. So we look here, and again, we've got these universal probability templates instead of the tier level based ones, loot stage based ones. So you have a high chance to get a perk book, medium high chance to get a farming recipe. Sorry about that. Medium chance to get a schematic, a low chance to get an electrical schematic, a low chance to get a tool schematic, low chance to get a schematic. Pardon me. So, if you are lucky to get all 3 when you if you loot a Crack-a-Book crate and get all 3 of the, basically it's like rolling dice, playing Dungeons and Dragons or something, and rolling the dice, and if it pops up that you got that thing, about that thing. Let's say you get all three. It then looks at this loot group, and it's hit 3 times. It makes 3 calls to it. So it will pop out 3 of these things on these probabilities. So most likely, you're going to get 3 perk books. That's the most likely thing to happen. But you could get any of these things. So again, we can just look at this particular table right here, schematics, mods, and general common, copy that, search. Right in here. So schematics, mods, and general, tier 0, tier 1, tier 2. And here we're actually seeing that these are locked behind loot stage. Probability tier 1 and tier cap, which was the second tier stage table. So we can look up, I believe. Yeah. So basically what it would do if you got a selection from this table, here gives you 1. And most likely it's going to give you a tier 0 one. But if you're at tier 1 or higher, you have a chance to get a tier 1 schematic. 2 or higher, you have a chance to get a tier 2 schematic. And because this is affected by your loot stage, the higher your loot stage, the more likely you are to get a higher level of schematic. So we can look here and see the tier 0 schematics right here are things like first stage bandages, cooling match, the hunter mod, all that stuff. Okay, tier 1 got like herbal antibiotics, scope, iron breaker, serrated blade, and or tier 2 rather, antibiotics, first aids, plaster casts, triple storage, pocket mods, laser sight, large scope, silencer, sound suppressor, the good stuff, basically military fun. So yeah, so that's how the loot tables actually work. It's just a series of calls that the game makes when you loot something. That's when, when it's looting, you got that countdown. That's what it's doing. Although that's also more of a function of the game, because it happens as fast as click on it. But what it's doing is that whatever it is you're looting, it's making a call to a table in this file, the top level of that table, and then depending on whatever the like airdrop right here, you loot an airdrop and it make a call to this and it selects 1 based on your tier level. And we can appear what the bundles are, like tier 1 bundles. I don't think that's a top level. But you can look here, like group coffins. This is a top level. So you always get something from the first group of coffin stuff. Low chance to get something from the second one, very low chance to get something from the third. So you will always get something from here. Loot a coffin. You'll get between 3 and 5 rotting flesh, between 3 and 5 cloth, 3 and 5 bones, with a medium and medium low probability for the second and third one. Have a low chance to get something, item of clothing, from this second group. And the third one here is cash, casino coin, silver, or gold coins, with low chance for all of low and very low. And again, because these are universal, it will not be affected by your loot stage. If you are loot stage 1, you have the exact same chance of getting rotting flesh as if you're stage 300, because they are completely universal, not affected by loot stage. But anything like here. Is that your loot stage mostly affects, like I said earlier, it mostly affects weapons and armor. But your weapons and armor are a massive part of the game. And it does also affect the quality of food you can find. It's all stuff to do with Twitch. Okay, mailbox, here's one. So, you have probability tier 0 to find stuff in this group. Tier 1 to find stuff in the tier 2 will be the same. Then there's a book pile here that is high, medium, so those universal probability. What books you can find is affected by loot stage, but how much you find, or if you get any at all, is not. And the same for the mailbox. What it may, the subgroup it makes a call to is affected by your loot stage. But if we look at this one right here, group mailbox 2, which call to on these two, we're back to books, all scaled, low probability, so it's back to that same one, or paper with a high chance. That one's universal, both of them. Far more likely to get between 5 paper than a book. Here's the bookcase one. Same thing. Always gonna find paper. Have a medium chance to get something. It's a book. And low chance to get a second. And if you want to, you can look through these loot tables and see how they all work together. But that's the gist of it. When you loot something, it makes a call to a top level table that's associated with that object that you're looting, and then whether, count all, or if there's a number there, 1 item, 2 to 4 items, whatever the case may be, it will select that many items from the subgroups, or if it is a group with items in it, it will select those items. However many is in the count. It says all, it will give you 1 of each, unless there is something like this, the loot probability template medium, force probability true, which means that there is only a medium probability that you get that item as well. So in this case, like the group Mo Power, it should give you 1 item from the first 3 tables, but the 4th one never means to get something, even though it says all. That just means that it checks all of the subtables that it's within its group. And if there is no probability template associated with it, it will give you whatever the count says. And if there is, it will have that probability chance of also being selected. Otherwise, it is not. Don't get anything. or a second item from the same table, possibly like the book table. So yeah, recap, higher loot stage, better stuff, and the loot tables basically work just by making a whole bunch of different calls to different levels of nested groups within the file that figures out what the game's going to give you. A lot of this stuff not affected by game stage or loot stage at all, but your really big items, anything that has quality, armor, weapons, and quantities of ammo in particular are all affected by your loot stage. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful. I know it is kind of a longer video. I wanted to explain how this stuff works in a way that I hope is understandable for everybody. So, yeah, one more time, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. See y'all later.